When you call 000 with chest pains, you expect help to come and come fast. For Brisbane mum Kath Groom, it didn't, and she died. The 51-year-old called 000 with chest pains at 10:26 on Friday night. Her case was considered urgent, code 1, which means paramedics should arrive in under 15 minutes. Multiple calls for help were made over the next hour and a half, but there was still no ambulance. Exhausted, Kath decided to go to bed. So she got her teenage son to call and cancel the request at 11:53 p.m. Tragically, the next morning, just after 9 o'clock, so 11 hours after that initial call, Kath was found dead by her son. Queensland Health Minister Shannon Fentiman and Commissioner of the Queensland Ambulance Service Craig Emery join me. I really appreciate your time today. Minister, code 1 is as bad as it gets. Why was an ambulance not available?
Yeah, Ali, firstly, I want to say that what's happened here with Kath is absolutely devastating. I'm devastated. Personally, I'm devastated for her family, particularly her son. And it is unacceptable that it took so long to get an ambulance to her. And for that, I am really, truly sorry.
You say it didn't get there in a quick and timely manner. It should have arrived within 15 minutes. 90 minutes later, there was still nothing. Is that good enough? Is there anything that can actually explain that?
It's not good enough, and there is a full review underway by the Queensland Ambulance Service, and the Commissioner has made it clear that they will make sure that they work with the family through that review. It was one of the busiest nights for our hardworking paramedics, and at the call centre they had to prioritise a lot of code 1 calls, but that doesn't change the fact that there should have been an ambulance there much, much quicker.
So the fact that a code 1 call wasn't answered, does that suggest that the whole system is broken? Because if that wasn't answered, I imagine that if you're a code 2, or say you're an elderly person who fell out of bed and you broke your hip, then I assume that there wasn't an ambulance available for you either that Friday night.
Look, our ambulance service was working hard. There were multiple calls to Kath and her family to check in to see whether her condition was deteriorating. They were prioritising a number of code 1 calls. But as the Commissioner has said today, and as I have said, we absolutely needed to have done better in this case.
Can any of us have faith that if our life is in danger, when it is literally a case of life or death, that help will be there?
I absolutely want Queenslanders to know they should call 000 and an ambulance will come. There'll be a full review of this case, and anything that we need to do to improve it, I'll do immediately.
Well, I'm not sure people have that faith if they call an ambulance it will come, because in this instance it didn't. And this wasn't a broken leg, this was a suspected heart attack.
And Ali, the overwhelming majority of Queenslanders who call an ambulance get an ambulance to their home. They're seen by paramedics. Unfortunately, that did not happen in this case. Now, I know that is incredibly difficult for Kath's family to hear right now, and we'll continue to work with them and support them.
I mean, I think for that poor family tonight that they are empty words. I understand the sentiment behind it. But Commissioner, when you found out that a 51-year-old single mother was dead because an ambulance didn't show when she really needed it, what was your reaction?
Oh, thanks, Ali. It's absolutely devastating for me as the Commissioner of the Ambulance Service, and I just reiterate the comments of the Minister, reach out to the family and express my condolences. We absolutely should have done better in this circumstance. We will do a review, but there are no excuses. We'll work our way through, and we'll do that with full transparency with the family, and hope in some small way that helps them.
Do you agree that there is a serious problem with the service you oversee?
With this case particularly, of course, we should have responded to that lady much more quickly. We were experiencing a surge in demand. It doesn't happen all day, every day. Most people get their ambulance on average within 8.5 minutes, which is close to our target, but that doesn't make any difference for the family in this circumstance.
And it only takes one case. It's taken one case and it's ended in a death. And look, I want to be really clear here that I'm not criticising our paramedics. I imagine that this has hit them all pretty hard, but they deserve better too, don't they?
Absolutely. This will be weighing heavily on those people that were involved, both in terms of how they were prioritising what was a very challenging period of time on Friday night.
What made this Friday night different to any other night when you say if you call an ambulance, it will be there?
That particular period from around about 9 o'clock in the evening until the early hours of the morning, there was a particular surge. There was a difficult level of demand. So we'll review, the review will identify whether those prioritising those other acuity patients was right or wrong, but clearly in hindsight we haven't got it right for this patient.
So in a situation like that, you can't just call in more staff?
The 4 or 5 days leading into Friday were significantly high demand. We'd actually deployed staff from North Queensland into Brisbane to assist in an overall surge. We had brought additional staff in to cope with that emerging workload. We have got in front of it now, but that culminated in this issue on Friday night.
So you weren't understaffed on Friday night?
No, we had the normal level of resourcing, so no, we had a full complement of staff spread across the entire Brisbane, southeast Queensland, of course.
How many of your fleet were stuck to offload patients at hospitals, and how many were actually on the road able to respond to a call like Kath's?
During that period, there was about 50% of the fleet were at the emergency departments across Brisbane and West Moreton. That's not unnormal though, because that is where, obviously when we're busy, the health service is busy, we transport patients to the hospital, so it doesn't mean that they're delayed. That's just exactly where we take the patients.
Is that backlog why there was no available ambulance for Kath in this instance?
As I said, I think overwhelming demand upon the ambulance service results in a demand upon the health services, so all of those factors contributed to us not being able to respond.
Can I get your thoughts on that, please, Minister? Because ramping at Queensland hospitals is bad, and that's where ambulances queue, waiting to transfer patients to emergency. This is a problem Australia-wide. South Australia is the worst, Queensland second, closely followed by Victoria. It is a terrible record to hold.
Ambulance ramping is my #1 priority, Ali. We are throwing everything at this, and in the last few months we have seen improvements when it comes to ramping, but there is so much more to do.
Minister, we often say, what's it going to take, a life? And in this instance it has. So if the worst of the worst can't be attended to, what happens to everyone else waiting for help to arrive?
I want to be really clear that Queenslanders shouldn't second guess picking up the phone for that ambulance, because overwhelmingly
I just
the
don't
ambulance
think,
will be
Minister,
there.
that people do have that faith, and I think right now they are terrified that if in the worst medical emergency they're facing, and it's a code 1, that an ambulance isn't going to arrive. How do you overcome that fear?
Well, we have to get up every day and make sure that our hard-working paramedics have all the support and the resources they need.
I don't think there is a possible worse outcome than what we saw on Friday. But Friday night, how many other code 1s were not responded to within the expected time frame? Do you know?
I'm not sure if the Commissioner has that information, Ali.
Overall, our response times for that day were quite within the normal limits, but as I said, in that small period of time, somewhere between 9 o'clock and the early hours of Saturday morning, we were stretched.
Do you know how many people specifically within that time weren't responded to within the 15 minutes?
Well, our performance target is 90% of patients within 16 and a half minutes. I can't remember the figure. It was very close to that for that day.
Look, I understand these are tough questions and it is a really distressing time. Can I just say that I really appreciate that you fronted. Trust me, there are many who wouldn't and don't in a situation like this. But what happened is unacceptable, and that Kath Groom is no longer here and her son no longer has a mum is a disgrace.
It's unacceptable, Ali. We both absolutely agree, and we both not only just offer our condolences and sympathies to the family, but a heartfelt apology.
March last year, Minister, there were reports of long delays, exhausted paramedics. Some were forced home by fatigue, others were using their own cars because there weren't enough ambulances. And then a year and a half later, this happens. Is the system broken?
Overwhelmingly, most Queenslanders are getting seen within the timeframes and targets set by the ambulance service. We've just employed an extra 200 paramedics over the last few months. We have more ambulances on the road than ever before, and whatever else our hardworking paramedics need to care for Queenslanders, we will make sure they get it.
You have Kath's case where the ambulance didn't show at all, and then last Thursday, 67-year-old foster care worker Wayne Irving died at Ipswich Hospital after waiting 3.5 hours for a bed. So that's 2 lives failed by your health system. And look, I know you don't want any of this, but how do you fix it? And how long will it take?
I am absolutely determined and focused to fix ambulance ramping. I announced $760 million on an ambulance ramping plan in this year's budget. We are starting to see some improvements, but it's about more beds. So we have nearly 3,000 more beds coming online in the next few years, Ali. So I'm determined to see improvement when it comes to ambulance ramping and the performance of our emergency department.
Can you guarantee that we won't have a case like this again?
I can guarantee you that I'm spending every waking minute working on improving the system.
Minister and Commissioner, I honestly appreciate you coming on tonight, and of course our thoughts are with Kath and Wayne's families. Impossible to imagine the grief that they're experiencing right now. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Ali.
Ali.